This is a magical pair of glasses. As long as you put them on, you can see things that ordinary people cannot see. Aang puts them on and looks toward a girl dancing ballet. In the next moment, she sees something horrifying. The so-called genius ballet girl is completely wrapped in thin threads, and above those threads are three terrifying monsters controlling her movements like a puppet. There is a legend about a group of evil people. They use witchcraft to kidnap gifted young girls. Then they stitch foreign bodies into their flesh using needle and thread. After that, they hang them up and let them ferment for 49 days. In the end, they are turned into puppets that can be controlled at will. These creations are called genius dolls. If a genius doll is stitched into an ordinary human body, that person will gain extraordinary talent in a specific field. The girl dancing in front of her right now is one of them. Her name is Maki. She is Ain's best friend. But one day, Maki suddenly displayed shocking ballet talent and became a genius ballerina overnight. That day, the two were practicing in the dance studio. Maki suddenly told Ain that her boyfriend had proposed to her at a bar last night. After saying that, she packed up her things and left the studio. Ain finally broke down in tears. Everything she longed for and admired always came effortlessly to Maki, but the more something is out of reach, the more it fuels one's determination. Tomorrow is the selection day for the lead role in the ballet performance. Ain made up her mind to work even harder and shine on stage the next day. On her way back, she saw a few elderly women arguing with an old man. They knocked over his bookstall. Ain stepped in to help clean up. Unexpectedly, the old man turned out to be a strange person. He introduced himself as Rasho. Then he gave Ain a book about genius dolls. He claimed everything in it reflects the truth of the world. He also told her to read it all the way to the end. Back in her dorm, Ain couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Rasho's words. Eventually, she opened the book. The book described a pair of glasses that could reveal genius dolls. If you cut out the glasses pattern from the book and wear it, you will be able to see the truth of everything. The next day, the ballet examination began. Ain failed again. She was eliminated in the first round. Then it was Maki's turn. Before her performance even ended, she had already won unanimous praise from the judges. Driven by jealousy, Ain put on the glasses. Watching Maki's graceful dance, she couldn't help but admire it. But suddenly, she saw black threads wrapped around Maki's wrists. Looking closer, her entire body was covered in them, and the end point of those threads was connected to three terrifying genius dolls. Ain stared at the scene in shock. So everything Rasho said was true. That night, Ain returned to the empty plaza again, but there was no one there. Suddenly, someone touched her back. It was Rasho's grandson, Rob. Rasho had already predicted she would come looking for him. Ain then told him everything she had seen. After hearing her story, Rasho confirmed that Maki was indeed using the power of genius dolls. The three genius dolls inside Maki were all legendary dancers from history. It is said that geniuses born with divine talent each have their own guardian spirits, and when those geniuses die, their guardian spirits disappear along with them. But later, someone developed a forbidden technique to bind those spirits. These people are called tailors. The missing geniuses were all kidnapped by tailors and turned into genius dolls through cruel witchcraft. They became living corpses, forever trapped in endless suffering. And if these genius dolls are stitched into a normal human body, that person can gain the talent of those geniuses. Maki clearly did exactly that. Her body is now imprisoned with three genius dolls. Rasho's true identity is a redeemer. He is someone who exists to fight against tailors. He asked Ain to help him release those three genius dolls from their eternal suffering. Because of her intense jealousy, Ain immediately agreed to Rasho's request. Later, Ain found Maki after class. She directly told her that she had seen the genius dolls inside her body. Then she took out the talisman Rasho gave her. Kindly, she warned Maki to be careful of that old man. Maki was deeply moved. Suddenly, Ain's tone shifted. She began blaming Maki for not being a real friend, because Maki had the help of genius dolls. Yet she never told her anything about it. She even watched Ain practice ballet foolishly every single day without saying a word. The more Ain spoke, the angrier she became, and she decided to cut ties with Maki completely. At that moment, Maki looked at her longtime friend. In the end, she softened. She brought Ain to a seafood market. Then the two of them arrived at a highly hidden underground facility. Inside, there were people wearing gas masks conducting inspections, but after seeing that Maki had three genius dolls inside her body, they respectfully let them pass. Ain followed closely behind. It turned out this place was a genius dolls supermarket, and all the genius dolls here came from geniuses across different fields in history. Maki told her that the genius dolls here could not be bought with money, they were tools traded among powerful and influential people around the world. These geniuses, who had died young, had all been turned into genius dolls. Aang felt confused about why she was brought here. Maki revealed her intention. She wanted to ask a tailor to turn Aang into a genius ballerina as well. But when Tailor Charlotte heard this, he immediately refused, because genius dolls could only circulate among elite families and would never be given to an ordinary person. Maki then told Charlotte that Aang had been sent by a redeemer, and Maki's plan was to stitch a genius doll into Aang as well, so that the redeemer would stop coming after her. But this violated the rules of the Tailor Association. Charlotte suggested simply eliminating Aang. However, Maki refused to betray her friend. In the end, she decided to give one of the genius dolls inside her body to Aang and hand another one to Charlotte. Charlotte immediately agreed, and so, Maki and Aang were both laid onto the operating table. The surgery began. Strange magical symbols lit up on the ground. Charlotte's hands transformed into claws and scissors, and he directly extracted a genius doll from Maki's body. Aang stared at the scene in shock. Then she noticed tears of pain flowing from the genius doll's eyes. Aang's heart softened instantly. She then pulled out the talisman hidden in her hair and attempted to stick it onto Maki and Charlotte. Just as she was about to place it on the genius doll, Charlotte broke free and whipped her to the ground. This was Charlotte's true form. After hundreds of years of evolution, high-ranking tailors had developed bodies beyond human limits. Charlotte saw Aang cursing him and decided to sew her mouth shut. Just as Charlotte was about to stitch her mouth closed, Rasho finally arrived. He formed hand seals and unleashed fire magic that forced Charlotte to beg for mercy. Rasho demanded the secret technique to undo genius doll stitching. Each tailor had their own unique knotting method when creating genius dolls. If forcibly undone, the genius doll would die. Rasho then ordered Rob to rescue the genius dolls inside Maki. Rob immediately began casting a spell, but instead of loosening, the bindings only tightened further. At that moment, Rasho realized he had been deceived by Charlotte. Suddenly, two massive tongues shot out and bound both Rasho and Rob. Charlotte had shed his skin to break free from the seal. The situation immediately turned desperate, and the genius doll could no longer be saved. But Charlotte had no intention of stopping. More tongues erupted from his mouth and wrapped tightly around the two of them. At that moment, the ground suddenly lit up with golden light. Rasho became possessed by a divine force with overwhelming power. Charlotte was struck again, but he still managed to shed his skin once more. However, he was soon knocked down by Rasho's spell. In panic, Charlotte shed his skin again and tried to escape. Rob then lifted a giant gourd. A sticky wave of paste erupted from it, trapping Charlotte completely. But unexpectedly, he still managed to shed his skin and escape. To prevent him from escaping again, Rob unleashed his ultimate technique. He raised the gourd above his head. A massive torrent of flames erupted from within it. Charlotte was instantly burned to ashes, but unfortunately, the flames spread toward Maki as well, and she was swallowed by them too. As the fire gradually spiraled out of control, the three of them had no choice but to flee the scene in panic. Watching the flames rise into the night sky like a pillar of fire, Rob cheerfully told Aang that he had discovered something remarkable. Inside the Genius Dolls supermarket, he found 640 genius dolls along with a ledger. According to the clues recorded in that ledger, they could track down the tailors who manufactured the genius dolls. As long as they could force a tailor to reveal the stitching password, all the bound genius dolls could be saved. Rob even invited Aang to join him in rescuing them, but Aang blamed him for recklessly starting the fire that led to Maki's death. The two immediately broke into an argument. Rasho stepped in just in time to stop them. He asked Rob to return and pack his belongings first. Then he apologized to Aang for dragging her into this conflict. Aang cried and begged him to bring Maki back to her. Rasho patiently explained to her that when tailors stitch genius dolls into a human body, they cast a temporary protective spell to keep the host alive. In other words, Maki was most likely still alive. After hearing this, Aang immediately tried to rush back into the burning site to find Maki, but Rasho stopped her. The destruction of the Genius Dolls supermarket had already been detected by the Tailor Association. At this very moment, they were likely already sending investigators to the scene. Those people were extremely dangerous. If Aang went back now, she would most likely be captured immediately. Rasho could only advise her to endure and wait for the right opportunity. Meanwhile, at the ruins of the burned Genius Dolls supermarket, members of the Tailor Association had already arrived. Even a high-ranking tailor named Elbadon was dispatched. he ordered his subordinates to thoroughly search the site for clues. After scanning the ruins, they detected signs of life beneath a collapsed section. Elbadon immediately ordered them to ingest a Hercules-type genius doll. After swallowing the genius doll, the subordinate's body instantly swelled to massive proportions. After a round of excavation, they finally found Maki, severely burned and barely alive. Maki was taken back to Elbadon's base. Fortunately, a faint trace of life still remained within her. However, Elbadon had a twisted and pathological personality. He prepared a room entirely covered in mirrors for Maki. Once she woke up, she would be forced to see her own charred and disfigured reflection from every angle. Hearing Maki's broken screams and cries, Elbadon felt a surge of perverse pleasure, even tearing up with excitement. After that, he ordered his subordinates to interrogate her. They needed to find out who destroyed the Genius Doll supermarket. But from the moment Maki regained consciousness, her mind was consumed by overwhelming hatred. No matter how they questioned her, she kept repeating that she would kill them all. Frustrated by her silence, the tailors brutally used scissors to cut into her hands. The intense pain pushed Maki further into madness. She could not accept her once beautiful body being reduced to such a state. She screamed over and over that she would never forgive Ain. She would kill her no matter what. Maki could not understand why. She had willingly given her genius doll to Ain, allowing her to become a ballet genius as well. So why did she still end up being harmed by the Redeemer? Fueled by hatred, Maki endured the pain of her burned body and forcibly broke free from her restraints on the operating table. The agony of being burned alive had left nothing in her heart except pure vengeance. This overwhelming hatred and obsession deeply fascinated Elbadon. He saw in Maki an extraordinary talent for becoming a tailor. The next day, Ain returned alone to the ballet studio, but Maki was already gone. Without her presence, Ain felt as if all color had drained from her life. She then went to Rasho's residence. When she arrived in a hurry, she found that the grandfather and grandson were already packing to leave. Ain desperately asked again about Maki's whereabouts. Rasho told her the truth. Maki had most likely been taken by the Tailor Association. He also warned her to stay safe. If there was any news about Maki, he would inform her immediately, but Ain insisted on going with him. She wanted to see Maki again at all costs. After a moment of thought, Rasho decided to accept her as his disciple. He believed that since she still cared deeply for her friend today, she would one day also show compassion for the suffering genius dolls. He then gave her a Redeemer artifact. Meanwhile, Elbadon began the final transformation. He stitched into her body a genius doll representing immortality, a genius doll representing seduction, and a genius doll representing strength. As the surgical process ended, Maki underwent a complete rebirth. She was officially given a new tailor named Christine Rose. Elbadon then declared that today was Rose's rebirth, her new birthday. Whatever she desired, he would grant it. But at that moment, Rose had only one wish: to kill Ain.